I shot all the footage for this video in December, then I got very busy with school, and now I suddenly have all the time in the world to edit. Here you go, new video. Does it fit? Hey guys, I hope you're all safe, I hope you're all healthy, and I hope you guys will enjoy this video. As always, it's been a long wait again. I've been very busy because, you know, my entire life changed this school year. Since I graduated high school, I moved out, I started going to art school. It's different from what I expected. It's also not your traditional kind of art school. It's kind of a combination of a lot of different mediums. So there's musicians and actors, all sorts of different people at my school, and that's very inspiring, but it's also kind of chaotic, and I don't think it's the best choice for me. So next year, my life is probably gonna change all over again. Here are some shots of my current student room. I hope you enjoy them, and I hope you'll enjoy this watercolor video that I have for you. Over the years, I've collected a lot of watercolor palettes, and a lot of them are still unopened. That's because I like to use up what I have before I start on a new one, and watercolors can last you years. In this video, however, I'm trying out a €5 watercolor palette from Flying Tiger, and I'm comparing it to a Winsor Newton watercolor palette, the Winsor Newton Cotman watercolor palette, which I managed to get for €10 in a sale. So that means the price difference wasn't that big. I do think the Winsor & Newton ones seem a bit more intense. One thing to note about this set is that some of the colors are kind of sticky. This causes dust to stick to the paints. Other paints were so dried that they didn't even want to stay in the pan. That problem is solved though when you start using the palette more, because the water and the paints will seep into the little nooks and crannies and it'll stick everything together. One more thing to note about this set is that it comes with a cute little travel brush. I haven't actually used it yet, but it's nice that you can put a cap on it so that the bristles are safe. Lastly, I'd like to note that I swapped out the white in this set for a purple that I picked up separately, and with all that being said, it's time to get into this painting process. I wanted to paint something bright and colorful with these new paints, so I decided to do a drawing of the inside of the Sgt. Pepper's album cover, and I think that was a good choice. I really like drawing the Beatles. I think you know that if you've been on my channel for a while. The paper I'm using here is by Canson. It's their XL Aquarelle paper, and I thought these paints worked very nicely on that. I could layer them, they look nice and vibrant. I also felt like these colors were just so pigmented. Compared to my previous watercolor sets, which were the Sakura Kois, I felt like these were easily activated, more pigmented, especially the color called Intense Blue. It almost drew the set out of balance because that color is so dark, so pigmented. And that's not a problem because the color still blends well with the other paints in the set. So we're moving on to the Flying Tigers. I did a very similar sketch, a slightly different pose though, and this time I colored it with the Flying Tiger paints. As you can see, this palette is slightly bigger, but it doesn't necessarily hold more paint. It's very similar to the Winsor & Newton setup-wise, color selection-wise. I felt like these paints didn't flow with the water as easily, and they also just didn't get as dark as the Winsor & Newtons. These paints just required a bit more work. This is the darkest I can get it without using black. I'm trying to mix brown and blue, but the colors just aren't that dark, so it's hard. The thing is, the Winsor & Newton set has one more brown than this set. This set has like an ochre and a burnt umber. I'm missing the burnt sienna. It's kind of a more warmer brown, and that was very useful for painting the hair. I did find myself really digging through the red in order to, you know, make up for the lack of burnt sienna, but the reds weren't that great either. They just weren't that vibrant. I feel like there was some white in there or just a lot of fillers, because, you know, it was just hard to mix a proper brown. Gotta say though, there's one thing in which this set beats the Winsor & Newton, and that is that it comes with a purple as it is. And I mean, for the price of €5, I think this watercolor palette is amazing. It's not chalky like a lot of cheap children's palettes. The paints just lay nicely on the paper, and I think they're very good to practice with since you have so many different colors, you have warms and cools, you know, it's just a good palette for any beginner. So I would definitely recommend getting this. Though if you are more familiar in the watercolor medium, I would say get something more expensive because you could probably get better results with that. I also don't know how light fast the Flying Tiger paints are. The Winsor Newton palette comes with a little booklet that holds all of that information, which I think is so fancy considering it's a student grade palette. And this is how my two paintings came out. I must say I prefer certain aspects of the second painting I did with the cheaper paints, but that I think has more to do with how warmed up I was because I hadn't used watercolors in a long time when I started trying these out. Now that I think about it, I feel like a lot of things I prefer in the second drawing are in the line work. I mean, some of it is also in the coloring. I think I prefer the skin tone, but that might be relative to the blue background, which is a choice and not something the Winsor & Newton palette couldn't do. So I don't know if you can compare them on that. Definitely do note that the coloring on the second piece looks a bit more sloppy. I think the colors went out of the lines or their designated areas more often than with the Winsor & Newtons, and that definitely has to do with the quality of the paints, I feel. I think my sketch looked better for the second drawing just because I was more warmed up after having done the first sketch. But I like both these pieces nonetheless. And I also like how this video came out. I hope you guys think the same, and I also hope to see you again in the next one. Bye!
Ты же знаешь, что держаться за ручку это опаснее, чем что-нибудь другое.